SANS training is one of the best educational experiences, but what you get out of a SANS conference, especially a national conference like CDI, is going to be basically all the relationships that you can develop with people while you're at the conference. You won't ever get to meet, 1,013 individuals that are specialists in the same field you are.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Really appreciate you folks tuning in today. And we have kind of a special episode for you. I'm going to be joined by a good friend of mine, someone who I've known for, my goodness, it's got to be at least 15 years now, who has agreed to come on and have a little discussion. But before we get to that, I just wanted to mention that this is actually our last live stream until December. Now, we usually do it every other week, but as you may know, there is a holiday in the U.S. coming up in 2 weeks, so we're going to skip that, and we'll be picking up again in December. And haven't yet published what that topic's going to be, so if you have some thoughts, you've got some questions, always happy to take those in. If you folks don't have anything that you submit to me, maybe during our live stream today or follow up in one of the chats, then I might pick something out of the Slack channel that I run that's connected to the Sec 595 class, where students come in and they often have problems, real-world problems they're working on after they've finished class. So we try to offer support and help them see how to solve some things. And actually, someone had a real interesting problem this morning, so maybe we'll pull that in. But without further ado, I'd really like to welcome to our live stream this week, Ismael Valanzeula, a good friend of mine. Ismael, I was thinking about it. I feel like you and I met in London near the Royal Victoria Docks. And my goodness, it's got to be like 2005, right?
That is correct. And it's a bit scary as well, because it feels like yesterday. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, 15 years? Seriously? I feel older now.
Time flies by. And I want to say you work at McAfee, but I don't think that's true anymore, is it?
Yes, McAfee Enterprise. Almost like you got 50% of it. McAfee Enterprise. Yeah.
And what is it exactly you're doing these days?
That's a very good question. When I was looking at your title there, and I was like, well, how would I call myself? And I think just like an InfoSec generalist, because I've done quite a few things over 20 years that I've been working in security. We called it InfoSec, right? Not cyber back then. InfoSec, information security. So I started, actually this week, it's my 10th anniversary. I started to work for McAfee, but it was like the Foundstone practice back in the day, and doing a lot of SOC related work, a lot of incident response, to be honest, and also some other maybe higher level type of consulting, sometimes risk assessments for large financial institutions, sometimes like deep forensics, other times like traffic analysis, doing threat hunting for some organizations. And when I came to the US in 2014, I started to work with a large customer that we have here in New York City, building and managing their security operations, critical environment here in the city. And in 2017, I moved into the engineering world, product engineering. And what I do is essentially, we have a team, we call it AC3. It's about adversaries, countermeasures, and tactics. So it's essentially about a philosophy that I share a lot in the class that I co-authored, and we'll probably talk about that later, which is like think red, act blue. Think as an attacker to be a better defender. So I help as an internal subject matter expert to software engineers, architects. I've had the pleasure to learn a lot from guys that are like PhDs in big data, PhDs in data science, way smarter than me. And I was able to, or what I tried to do is to help a little bit with, will this work for the practitioner? Will this work for the customer? Right? And trying to make sure that whatever we do, it's going to be effective. So we talk a lot about efficacy in that context of testing, minor attack evaluations and things like that.
Excellent. And now, if you're joining us late, this is a good friend of mine, Ismael Valanzeula, who's agreed to join us this week. We've got some shout outs. Hey there, we've got Stephen Hart from DC. He's our wonderful engineer. We've got someone from Colombia. Wonderful. Nice to have you here. And we've got, now, is it Adadayo Busari? Wow, that's a cool name coming from Houston. Welcome. Nice to have you here. And we've got, of course, folks here both on YouTube and LinkedIn. And depending which one you're watching this on, I know that sometimes the stream quality seems to be a little bit better on the LinkedIn side. So if you're looking for a better stream quality, you might jump over there. Also, if you're interested in these kinds of topics, that is things to do with information security generally. And there I go, Ismael, right? You just said that. When I started, this was just information security, but we keep wrapping different names around this. But if you're interested in that stuff, particularly with regard to how to do monitoring and threat hunting, AI and machine learning applications, then you may want to like or subscribe or follow our channel. Of course, the Cyber Defense channel also puts on all kinds of other really useful content. So it's worthwhile subscribing, even if you don't come to every one, just so you get that notification and know that it's coming up. Hey there, Rudy. Nice to have you from Patterson, New York. I feel like I should probably know you, but I can't put a face to you just now. Ismail's laughing, so I know he recognized you. Hey there, JC. Nice to have you. Now, Ismael, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because you really are a SOC expert, and I wonder if you, like me, find that the longer you're in this field, you find we start attaching names to things and calling them things, and you look at the name and look at the definition and say, oh, so that's what I've been doing all these years. And you were doing SOCs before SOCs were cool. So what does a SOC mean to you, and what kind of variations do you see or interpretations do you see in enterprises?
I thought you were going to ask me about zero trust. Like, hey, we've done this before. Maybe we can talk about that later if you want. So it's interesting. A SOC right now seems to be like the coolest thing, as you say. But then when you dig deeper and you realize what people is calling a SOC is sometimes like, hey, I bought a SIM, so I have a SOC, right? Or I have a playbook to automate some responses. Therefore, I must have a SOC. And to me, a SOC, or let's say security operations, right? Security operations is about, first of all, understanding your valuables, understanding what you're trying to defend, what's important to the organization, what are the problems you're trying to fix, and then what are the threats, right, out there that are applicable to your environment, because each environment is different. And to me, that's more interesting than just talking about tools or playbooks or automation, because it requires strategy. Right? It requires leveraging the human cognitive skills to put everything together, from the business part to the technical part, and then saying, okay, how do we tackle this problem? At the end of the day, it's all about monitoring, and I think that's the main mission of a SOC, right? To monitor the things that matter and understand attackers' behaviors. We talk a lot about that these days, with the intention of reducing the impact of these attacks on the business.
Yeah, that's a really good definition. Before I come back to that zero trust comment, so I've got hello there from Alejandro up in Toronto. Good to have you. We've got some anonymous LinkedIn user. Don't know where you're from. Nice to have you here. And someone tuning in from India, Pranav. Thank you very much for being here. Charleston, South Carolina. We've got people all over the place. And we've also got, what is that? Rahid from Canada. Nice to have you. So that zero trust thing, that's actually something I kind of like. I wonder if you have the same take on it, actually, because I use that as an example of how language changes and how we come up with new names to make the new cool thing. And I kind of wonder sometimes if it's for marketing or if it's because it's like the business doesn't get it, so I need a new term. Because to me, we talk about defense in depth, and that's the origin of all this. And then people say to me, well, we need microsegmentation, then we need nanosegmentation, then we need zero trust. And I say, isn't that all just defense in depth?
Segmenting until it hurts, right? Exactly. It's funny you mentioned that. I remember when I started working in InfoSec and cybersecurity, I went to London for the first time. It was the year 2000. And I went to InfoSec World. It was actually 2001, April 2001. And you know what was the marketing theme of that event? Because every year there's like the year of something. Right now it's probably zero trust. But it was the year of PKI. PKI was going to solve all the problems in the world. Where's PKI today? Of course, we use it with everything, right? It's embedded into a lot of the things that we use on a daily basis. But it's just one more thing in that defense in depth architecture. So I think it's a mix of marketing, and at the same time that people are still very focused on the shiny object, on the product, and not that much on the strategy, the outcome. So what are you trying to do with this?
Yeah, that's very true. It is often true that we want to spend money on a product rather than investing in the people. And management understands we need to invest in people too, but that investment in the product is just so tantalizing and so tempting because it promises it'll fix the problem. And of course it never does. Before we go on, we've got a hello from Ramon Hermida, who remembers Ismael running SOC and forensic operations from Portable Drive. That's awesome. And hello there, Jeff. Nice to have you from the Netherlands. When it comes to SOC, Ismael, I wonder, what if you're an organization or you're in an organization, but you're just on your own? You're the only security person. I mean, you can't possibly be a SOC, right?
So Justin and I, we call that person the all-around defender. It's like the one that wears all these different hats. It's like you're going to defend the network, and you're going to defend the endpoints, and you're going to defend applications, and you're going to defend the cloud as well. So yeah, good luck with that, right? Or we just bought the analyst a SIEM, we put it in front of the SIEM, and we said, congratulations, defend all the things. Right? You have all the logs, therefore you should be able to defend everything. It's hard. When it's 1 month SOC, it's very hard. And at the end of the day, you need to leverage augmentation from third parties somehow. And there are many organizations doing that. But the interesting thing that I have found over the years is that, and I've talked recently, both in class and in my day-to-day work with large security operations centers, in large retails, large financials, that they have people in the hundreds working in the SOC. They have their own threat intelligence teams. And it's interesting that when you go deeper, you find that they have the same challenges regardless of the budget. Sometimes even the bigger the organization is, the more challenges they have because of lack of communication and integration between these teams. But it's definitely possible to be a good, solid, all-around defender if you are laser focused on the things that matter.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, we got another shout out here from George Karapalafis in Greece. Nice to have you here as well. And for any who are joining late, I'm joined today by my good friend Ismael Valanzeula, who's working at the McAfee Enterprise, and he's kind of a SOC expert and one of the co-authors of the, what actually is the name of that class? I can't keep it in my head.
Defensible Security Architecture and Engineering.
There it is. So it's a really a very it's a class that's focused on creating effective solutions. That's kind of how I would summarize it. And in fact, with that in mind, thinking about those SOC teams, whether it's the one-man team or the bigger team, and trying to be effective, what does that mean in the context of a SOC? If we were to talk about efficacy, what's really involved?
I appreciate you asked me that, because when we talk about efficacy, traditionally we would first thing that comes to my mind is like the A/B test reports, right? How much malware did you block? How many things did you detect, right? It's like you've been teaching for many years, traffic analysis, NOR, Suricata, now Zeek, like all these different tools. Like, did you detect this? Yes or no? And it feels like it's like very digital, right? Very binary. It's always like yes or no. But the reality is that, and I'm going to refer to an author that I've enjoyed over the years, and I have to say that class in 2005 that I attended in London was your class on auditing. You mentioned something that opened my eyes and was like, wow, why is that? I've never heard about this before. Time-based security. So I started to read more about that author, and he says something interesting. He says, like, security is not digital, security is analog. And it's true. I think you play music as well, right? So you cannot see it, but I have a few amps over here. I don't use them much these days. These guitar amplifiers. And you have all these knobs. And the SOC is more like that, right? There's always like a lot of knobs, way more than what you have here. And if you turn, let's say, the pitch up or the volume down or any of these like different knobs, it's going to affect something. Some things will be better, other things will be worse. So it's very complex to manage all of that. So there's no one single measurement of efficacy. I like to think that we need to be able to define efficacy in terms of not just protection and detection, but also visibility. What's your coverage in terms of visibility? I think minor attack has been very helpful there to help us to measure that a bit better, right? Look at data sources. And obviously, you can't have everything. You need to be surgical. What is that you need? Do you get this, or do you have blind spots? So that's a measurement of efficacy. And that's important for not to have false positives, but not to have false negatives when the SOC goes and does hunting or is doing investigations.
Yeah,
efficacy.
very nice.
Yeah, efficacy in terms of investigations, for example. How do you measure the quality of an investigation? Analyst A is investigating something and says, oh, this is a false positive. Analyst B is doing the same thing. Maybe they reach out to the same conclusion. But does it really matter how they reached out to that conclusion? How much data they had, right? How much context they had? Do they have the tools that help them to do these concepts that we discuss a lot at SANS, like analytical pivoting, summarization of the data, aggregation of the data. So efficacy is much more than just like, did you block something, yes or no? That's how I like to see it.
Yeah, that's a really good illustration. And from our audience, someone on LinkedIn is talking about what a great analogy that is. The security is analog and not digital. And I think you're talking about Win Schwartau. Isn't that the
yes,
author?
My German is not very good, so I will probably mispronounce the name. I didn't want to, but yes, thank you.
Yeah, he wrote a book some years ago on time-based security. It's quite nice. It's not very big. It's not a very big book. Be careful if you happen to go on Amazon. Last time I looked at that on Amazon, the only copy was used. They wanted like $1,000 for it. And I'm not sure that book is worth $1,000, but it's an interesting concept.
It's actually free right now. Maybe he actually realized of that and made it free. So if you just like go to his website, the PDF of the book, which is like just a few pages, right?
Yeah.
Such a simple concept, but I have to say we actually use it in class, not for auditing, but to say, look, if you had to explain why you are investing why you want to invest on EDR or XDR or in this new technology or this new capability, it's called a capability. How do you explain the gap, right? What is this going to help you? Is this going to give you more protection time, or is this going to give you maybe to help you to shorten detection and reaction time? So it's a really good framework, very simple to explain, to convey strategy, right? Why we do things.
Excellent. There's a question I wanted to ask you, and I had you in mind particularly because in the roles you've had over the years, you've had an opportunity to work either as a SOC or interacting with SOCs at a number of enterprises. So I'm really curious, what have you seen with regard to AI or machine learning solutions and adoption of them in SOCs and how good they are? And because, of course, everyone's trying to sell us those. So I'm interested in your kind of real world perspective on that.
Of course, the last few years has been the years of AI and machine learning, right? And the truth is that, AI, I think everybody will agree. I remember I read an article from a Harvard Business Review a few years ago that mentioned that AI is like the internal combustion engine of our days, right? It's like revolutionizing everything. And you look at, voice and image recognition and how far we got into that. Self-driving cars and all these things that we have today. But when you look at how much of that we have applied to cybersecurity, I think we've done certain things, but in reality, I don't think that's AI. I think it's more like IA. If you're wondering what that is, like intelligent amplification. Right? We can do certain things faster and certain things better, thanks to machine learning mostly, because that's what we have really been applying to cybersecurity and what we're applying for the most part right now. But not every single problem is a machine learning problem, right? And that's the other thing. Like, machine learning helps in certain situations, but it's not the solution to everything. And sometimes when I hear about that, I think about that fair that I attended like in 2001, where peak AI was going to solve all your problems. And we've had that over the years. Next-gen firewalls is going to solve all your problems. IDS is dead, right? In 2003,
Yeah.
you're just going to deploy IPSs and attackers will not be able to attack your company. That doesn't work like that. Even with zero trust, it's like, well, we have maybe less trust, but there's always some implicit trust. But you can react to it, right? Detect and react faster. So I think that we're not yet there. I think we're getting towards a place where the technology will be better to the point where it will be able to learn more from humans. But definitely, if you ask me if AI or it's going to replace the human analyst in the SOC, I would say that's not going to happen, because to me, it's like, it's not about one or the other. It's about using both.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I actually do a demonstration sometimes with kind of an executive level presentation about AI and machine learning, and trying to get across to them that it's probably not what you think it is. Because when you talk to people generally, I mean management particularly. So let me say that differently. Non-technical. So someone who has not investigated machine learning, they're often having this vision that it's like what we see in the movies. And that is absolutely not what it is. It is instead a technology accelerator. It's something I can use to support things I do, but it doesn't solve my problems. And in fact, there's a question or two here. So first, a shout out. Hi there, Marlene. Nice to have you here. We've got a Ramon Hermida, who we mentioned before. He remembers you doing the forensics. He's saying he doesn't think we fully utilized AI in the cybersecurity field. I absolutely agree. For me, that's kind of the motivation between that 595 class, because in that class, we focus on how do you take this machine learning and AI theory and these data science approaches. That's great. I can tell you all about them, but how do you take your problem and solve your problem with those techniques? And there seems to be a huge gap in our industry in how to do that. In fact, you told me a story about that. I'll come back to that in a little while, because someone did have a question. So let me get to the question here. How effective and accurate do you predict AI and machine learning to ever be, given our current method of adoption? Maybe rate of adoption, I'm not sure. Where would you apply the concept of analog security?
Interesting.
About that?
So I actually wrote a blog post a number of years ago, and I was going back to that recently, in preparation for this discussion, and I was like, wow, it feels like still very relevant 3 or 4 years later. And so essentially, I came up with, I co-authored this with people, as I said before, way smarter than me, on experts on big data and data science. And we talked about maturity levels, like different maturity levels of machine learning. And there's like, first maturity level, which is there is an algorithm, right? Machine learning algorithm, typically, that it's going to aggregate some information, it's going to summarize it, maybe show you like a cluster of things, so you don't have to treat every single alert individually, and you do something with that, right? That typically requires some pre-canned models. Sometimes what we call machine learning models is nothing but just like traditional signatures or heuristics, right? And the human now has to do something with that. And that's where the difficult part starts, right? Yes, we have SIM, we have EDR, we have all these different things. And, maybe with the assistance of some of these models, we reduce the data that you have to see. Maybe we come up with some nice visualizations. But you still have to do all the analysis yourself. What does it really mean? One of the problems that machine learning models have is that they're essentially designed to give you answers, but not necessarily to tell you how they arrived to that answer. The context, explainability that we say it's so critical in a SOC, right? Because it's all about context. You don't have it. The next level would be like, now we're going to give you more like insights. We're going to say, you know what? We have this process communicated to this other process in this other machine. We see that this type of activity, this looks like lateral movement. That's great. That gives you direction, right? Now I can understand a little bit what could be happening there. I still have to do analysis. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I have some degree of understanding of what's going on. The next level, I think it's more towards where we should be heading, and I don't think we have anything like that right now, where the machine can also learn from the analyst, from the responses of the analyst. And I think we're getting there, but not at that point where when we think about AI in the movies, we think about having a conversation with a machine that is intelligent. And that entails that the machine can understand me, but also adapt the behavior based on my behavior. And there's something that AI or machine learning algorithms are not going to be replacing ever, in my opinion, which is the human ability to have ethics, to have a strategy, creativity, right? Things that machines cannot really emulate. However, machines can do certain things way faster than we do. So if we combine these two things, a machine that can, process data very fast, tell you what's anomalous, present it in a certain way that makes sense to you, so you can orient that response. And then the machine say, oh, you know what? Every time I send this to Ismael said that this was a false positive, so I'm not going to present it to you anymore. I'm going to, put it over here. And you know what? I've seen these type of patterns before, and I know that after the lateral movement, somebody's going to go to your domain controller and they're going to be dumping entities.data, for example, from a domain controller, right? Or they're going to be executing this tool. So, by the way, I think that this is what's going to happen next. Look at these particular movements. And then we start thinking about defense in like a chess game, right? Where there's an attacker and there's a defender. And there's always n number of movements. It's a mathematical game, right? And funny enough, like machine learning doesn't solve chess at all. So if you translate that into something even more complex, which is the real world, and attackers that have human intentions, like intentions that machines cannot comprehend because there's like geopolitical issues and all type of like business context, people going through mergers and acquisitions and certain objectives that are really hard for a machine to understand. It's never going to be like, oh, machines are going to solve this problem by themselves. But humans, along with machines, working at higher cognitive levels, I think that's the goal. And we're still not there.
Yeah, very good. I don't disagree with you, Ismael. I mean, there's aspects of that we can accomplish today, but whether or not those things are penetrating into cybersecurity is a whole different thing. Because part of what you're talking about is the learning from the analyst. Well, I can build that. I can build that reinforcement learning system. But I don't know of anybody who's doing that in cybersecurity. And then there's the whole problem of, as it begins to learn and says, well, I'm just not going to send that to Ismael anymore. Could that end up creating a blind spot for us? Because there's some nuance to it that the machine just doesn't get, because it's about context and this idea that while I can create complex behaviors with these algorithms, they really are just algorithms. It really is just math. There's no intuition there. So there can absolutely be false correlations and bad decisions made. It's not deciding the way we would decide.
Right. There's no gut feeling.
Yeah, that's right. I saw Rudy Villalona was saying, especially since context is needed when isolating actionable alerts versus noise, the human element is always required. And I don't really see a time that's going to change, because knowing the internals of how these algorithms work, how do you quantify human intuition? And quantification is how all of machine learning works today. And even if I hear people say sometimes, well, what about quantum computing? What'll that do? Nothing. That'll just mean we don't have human intuition faster. That's really all it's going to do for us. There's a fundamental change that would have to happen.
It's funny that this, I learned recently, Dave, that this company that makes robots, I'm not going to say the name, but it's out there. You can see this. You've seen these, videos of the robots like just jumping and doing things like big ones, not too far from us here on the East Coast, right? And they do not use machine learning algorithms to build those robots. That doesn't mean they're not going to use them, right? But it means that every technology has its own place, and when you use like machine learning algorithms along with other technologies in the right way, with the right combination, it can really augment the capabilities of the SOC. And that's what we're going to be seeing, more like a intelligent amplification, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just working on. I'm doing a little revision on the machine learning course, and one of the things I'm doing is adding in a new lab exercise where we work through building a deep learning network that is currently about 85% accurate in being able to distinguish malware from non-malware. And it's doing all of that without signatures, which is, really useful, really handy. And the idea of, but how is it making that decision? See, someone just running a tool like that, you wouldn't know. You really need to be the architect of that solution and be able to pull it all apart to understand how it's making the decision. And even then, the decisions it's making may just work out to be probabilistic correlations. And something that a human could work out, but probably wouldn't, because there's so many factors involved. So it is powerful, but it's maybe being overemphasized by commercial solutions and being sold as the solution or the end all or be all. Before we go on, we've got some shout outs here from Jan in Missouri. Nice to have you there. And a comment here from JC about zero trust. And I agree with what you end that with, that the analyst's intuition is still necessary. I think that agrees with what Ismael and I are both saying. So Mark, you missed the name of the publication. What was it again? So I think you were talking about a book written by a gentleman named Win Schwartau, and the name of the book is Time-Based Security, or pamphlet might be a better description of what it is. It's not deep, but it's very interesting. It's a very nice way of thinking about things. We also have a question from Ignacio Garcia Bailon, I think. How do you think attackers could use AI in an offensive way in the future? Do you want to take a stab at that, or you want me to give an answer? What do you think, Ismael?
Yes. Again, I'm not a data scientist. I've worked with a lot of data scientists, and I still do. And there is like this concept of, offensive machine learning or adversarial machine learning. That's the word that seeks to. Obviously, they have the same access to the technology as we have, right? So they could use it to throw off these machine learning models. So they think they're seeing something when it's not that thing; it's something else. And if you look on your Google app, I had the pleasure to work with a really smart scientist on that presented a lot of publications on it, and I think that's going to be it's going to be used right in the future. Do I see that being used today? Not that much. And why? Is because while we're here probably having these discussions around AI and machine learning, attackers are exploiting your unpatched Exchange box that is on the DMZ facing the internet, or like some other work cloud a cloud workload that is not protected, or it's like wide open, or an S3 bucket that doesn't have authentication, or just like phishing your users and trying to bypass a multi-factor authentication with just a call and saying, hey, here's your support team, like, what is your PIN for this? We need to help you with something else. That's not a machine learning problem. It's not an AI problem to a certain extent, although I think we could do so much better at detecting anomalies, right? That we're doing today. But I think attackers, they can still cause impact without getting to that level of sophistication. So attackers are lazy at the end of the day. They can get away with running a very profitable ransomware campaign out of a very old PC. And sometimes we've seen these photos when the FBI or law enforcement breaks into the house of this criminal, and it's like, that's the command and control center. It's an old PC running Windows 7. That's it. No machine learning, no AI anywhere. We still have to do better at covering the basics.
Yeah. And it's true that for many tasks, it is much simpler to use traditional programming techniques to divide and conquer and write the solution. And that AI and machine learning really only start to have value when we're dealing with a much larger scale of similar problems, that we might be able to build an AI or machine learning algorithm that will be able to solve all of them simultaneously without doing the human training. But it's still that give and take. It still requires that human piece. I saw Vikash was saying it depends how you train it and given the complexity, but talking about how the goal is human and machine to work at the same level. I would adjust that a little bit, Vikash. I don't disagree with you, but It's about the humans and the machines being good at what they're good at. So that machine learning really shouldn't be viewed as a replacement for the human, like in the SOC. I'm nowhere near replacing analysts with AI or machine learning solutions, even though we build them and research them. But instead, we view them very much as tools that can help that analyst get through vast amounts of data quickly. For example, one of the things we do in 595, we take this problem of, imagine you have 50 million DNS lookups. Sure, you can use signatures to try to find bad domain names in there, but there's bad domains coming up all the time. How can I take a team of analysts and get them through 50 million DNS entries in a reasonable amount of time? Well, the machine learning becomes the accelerator for that, because then I can identify patterns for me easily that I can't just do without writing a lot of code. You know, I don't want to let time get away from us, because we are actually running out of time here today, amazingly. And I wanted to take a minute and ask you to tell us about the class that you've created, the Defender class, the Infrastructure, Security, and Engineering course. So tell us a little bit about that. What's the goal? What could someone expect to learn if they came to that?
Well, I could say that it's just zero trust class, right? And then it's like, that's it. Because it's a zero trust class. And in fact, we start from day one building the foundation, working with the network, and then, going up the stack and applications and cloud and towards a zero trust architecture, right? But I like to say it's an all-around Defender class. So it's a class about how to make the most out of your existing investment before you go and buy more tools, which is something I've seen throughout the many years I've done security. People consistently fail to leverage the technology and the capabilities they already have in the house. And they feel like, oh, the next product or the next solution is going to fix it. And they just add more complexity sometimes. Right? So we take an approach that is sometimes strategic. Sometimes we zoom out and we say, okay, why do we need this? Let's talk about time-based security, right? Protection, detection, and response. Let's talk about think red, act blue philosophy. Let's talk about how to do practical threat modeling. Right? Okay, you want to defend your organization against what? Let's do this with MITRE ATT&CK. Most people haven't ever used MITRE ATT&CK in this particular way. So we start the very first day, first lab, going through a practical threat modeling exercise. Okay, so you're concerned about these threats. How do they behave? All right, so this is what we need to do. We need to architect for visibility, for detection, which are different things. Right? For detection, you don't want to have a lot of false positives. For visibility, you don't want to have false negatives, which means you may need different technologies, different products for this. And then obviously protection. So we work, through microsegmentation at all the layers. Segmentation at network layer, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, but also segmentation when it comes to identity management, for example. And we keep building these layers until we get to defense. Defense in depth. Zero trust. Zero trust. And we introduce the concept of variable trust, which is great, right? It's not really that we're not going to have ever any trust, because we said security is not digital, it's analog. But how do you react faster? How do you detect faster and react faster? So we bring it back to the things we saw during the class. These are all the different technologies or sensors that you can place around your network, your endpoints, your cloud workloads that can help you to detect faster and then orchestrate responses. And what I like the most about the class is that by day 5, at the end of day 5, it's like they see it, right? They see how everything comes together. I had some students saying, this class helped me to connect the dots for the first time. I've been working in security for a long time, and now I can see why it matters what we're doing and how to explain it to others, like how I explain it to my management so I can get the support that I need to have these capabilities in place.
Wow, that sounds really wonderful. It's interesting too. I mean, as we talk about zero trust, and that phrase keeps coming up. Sorry, I confused you with my defense and prep stuff. But I've tried to get across to customers sometimes, kind of a hyperbolic example of it, when they're talking to me about, well, we use zero trust, and yet they have that unpatched system sitting over there. I tell them, Well, if you really have subscribed to Zero Trust, what that should mean is we can remove your firewall and just connect you straight to the internet, and you are no more vulnerable. And the look on their face, of course, it's just, no, that would be terrible. Well, then you haven't really gotten the point, have you? It's just tough to get people to get security as a discipline,
It's much more than products. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And that is something we try to discuss in class as well. Like we say, we're going to demystify a lot of these things in this class. This is how how the products work. And when you look at the technology and how they're built, it's not that there's nothing like it's rocket science.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what you do with your class as well. That let's demystify machine learning. This is how it works. This is what it works for, and this is what machine learning is not for. So you're going to need other pieces, right?
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Who would you say are who's the target audience? So if I'm sitting here listening to you today and this sounds kind of interesting, who really is being targeted? Who would you suggest attend that class?
Good question. So we said it's for all around defenders. So it's obviously for anybody that is interested in blue teaming as a practice in general, in how to defend against these attacks. But it's a technical class. So it's a 5-level class. It's hands-on. It's technical. We have lots of exercises. In the last update, we added a bunch of bonus labs, and some of them with vendors that they give us access to some of their platforms, and we can just say, you know what, you want to try this with this particular vendor, you want to do a bonus lab with them, great. This is how they implement this concept. So students can also see how the industry is implementing them. But we've had from enterprise security architects that they're usually more interfacing with the business, more like a higher level, that they want to understand the technology and how it works so they can make sound decisions, to SOC managers that they say, you know what, I'm never going to be doing the hardening of a Docker container myself, but I want to know what my team should be doing or what the SOC engineers need to be doing. Or I just want to be interested in understanding, what are the things that I need to discover and assess to be able to send my engineer team to implement it. So we have a wide, different array of people and backgrounds that come to this class. From people coming fresh from college, for example, mm-hmm. that they've had some training in security and now they want to learn, in practical terms, what works and what doesn't. And so that's very satisfying.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm thinking about too how imagine we've got a lot of people tying in on LinkedIn, and quite frequently we'll have not just cybersecurity professionals, but sometimes some folks who are in management. And if you're someone in management who's listening to this, I feel like sometimes hearing some of the feedback that comes out of the mouths of the students, the engineers who have attended the class, or even management people, can help to make a decision about whether or not this would be a good fit or money well spent. So what's some of the best feedback you've had from students coming out of this class?
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, because sometimes you have some students that, especially the first days, they come to you and it's like, what product do I need to buy? I need to do this. Tell me, what's the product I need to buy? And by the end of the class, now they can answer these questions by themselves, and they're more skeptical, right? They're like, oh, I need to test things. This is what the marketing material says, but this is what I need to do to test it. These are the security outcomes that I really need, right? To check, to see, going back to efficacy. This is what makes my tool, my product, my solution, check these boxes for visibility, for detection, for protection, for reaction, investigations, and all of this. So we've had this week I received an email, actually Eric Conrad, one of the co-authors, received an email saying, hey, I'm a graduate from school. I attended your class, and this was the best class I've ever taken. It helped me to connect all the dots. And she actually wants to write a research paper and want to quote Security 530. We've had, last week I was teaching in Denver, and I had comments from somebody that has been in the industry for 40 years. And he said, even though I've been in the industry for 40 years and I've done pretty much everything, I'm still learning new things out of this class. So to me, that's very rewarding. And comments like, hey, I want to send all my team to this class because they need to hear this. My engineers, my architects, they need to hear this. So that's very gratifying, I Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So we've been, with the whole lockdown and everything else, a lot of things have just been live online. But I know you recently just taught out in Denver. I don't even know if it was this class. Was it this class?
Yeah, Security 530. That's right.
It was. And are there any live events coming up anytime soon?
Yes, I will be teaching at CDI virtually this time in December, right? So that's coming up, and I've seen some of the ads coming up on the live stream as well. And also January, I will be teaching, or my co-authors, either Justin Henderson or Eric Conrad. You can go to the website and see. We have also other fantastic instructors like Greg Scheidel, Josh Johnson, and others that are teaching this class as well. So different formats.
Yeah, kind of an all-star cast you've got there. Well, Ismael, I want to thank you so much for being willing to come and join us today to share some of your experience, some of your knowledge and opinions about the place of machine learning and AI and just how SOCs are running in general. Now, for all of you folks, I really appreciate you being here. And as I said, it's our last live stream until December. And in December, we will likely be doing another kind of episode of Dave's Python Fails. So not sure what that will be just yet. If you have suggestions or thoughts or something you'd like to see solved, please do let me know. We've got a kind of a shout out here coming in from Rudy. I love that the class is about the discipline of defensible engineering and not product focused. Yeah, that is so important. And you're right. It's a common thread with SANS. It's one of the nice freedoms that we have as instructors and as authors in SANS. Never does any vendor have an influence on any of the material we write, nor do any vendors have any influence on the opinions that any of the instructors share. We try to be very vendor neutral. Sometimes people misunderstand that because we don't want to recommend vendors, but it's because of that, because we don't want to be vendor centric. If you want vendor training, go there. We want to tell you how it works and how to do it right. That's what we're focused on. Anyway, we're going to be bringing this one to a close, but I'd like to ask that if you've got additional questions or thoughts, please feel free continuing putting them in the chat, and maybe myself or Ismael can get back to you. Also, if you have recommendations for other things, other interviews you'd like to see, people you'd like us to talk to, even vendors, I'm not opposed to interviewing a vendor and getting them to demo something for us. If we have questions, I'm very happy to do that. Otherwise, I really appreciate you folks being here. For those who are in the U.S., you've got a week coming up where you've got a little bit of time off, so I hope you enjoy that time off. Thank you very much for coming today. If you find this interesting or interested in cybersecurity-related topics, particularly with the AI and machine learning or deep packet inspection and threat hunting focus, then please do feel free to like or subscribe and follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for attending today.